The smell of smoke woke me before I ever saw the flames. As I struggled into the hallway, I shouted, "We have to get out! The house is on fire!" Instead of running toward me, my daughter screamed, "Max, where's Max?" Then my son-in-law yelled from downstairs, "Forget him, grab the filing cabinet first." My injured leg gave out as part of the ceiling crashed down on me. Trapped beneath the burning beam, I listened to their footsteps disappear, and what I heard next shattered everything I believed about my own family. Thank you for choosing to spend this time here. Tell me in the comments, what part of the world are you in right now? I read every single one. Some elements of this story are fictional, added to bring the message to life. Names and locations are not drawn from any specific person or place, but the lesson inside is worth keeping. I remember that detail more clearly than anything else from that night. The way the smell crawled under the bedroom door, first thick and chemical. Nothing like the warm wood smoke from a fireplace. This was something angrier. Something that meant business. I sat up in bed, and my first thought, God help me, was that I had left the stove on again. Margaret used to tease me about that. "Arthur Hollis," she would say, pressing 2 fingers against my chest. "One day you are going to burn this whole house down with your absent-mindedness." She said it with a smile every time. I never once thought she might be right. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and felt the floorboards. Warm. Not just warm hot. The kind of heat that climbs up through wood when something beneath it has already been burning for a while. "Diane." My voice came out rougher than I expected, scraped raw by the dry air. "Diane, get up." "Nothing. Preston." I called louder, pushing myself to my feet. The room tilted slightly. I was 72 years old with 2 bad knees and the kind of sleep that sits heavy on old bones. I grabbed the nightstand to steady myself, and that was when I heard it. "Max, Max, where are you, Max?" Diane's voice, high and frantic, coming from somewhere down the hall. Not calling for me. Calling for the dog. I pulled the bedroom door open, and a wall of heat slapped me across the face so hard, my eyes watered immediately. The hallway was already orange at the far end, smoke rolling along the ceiling in thick black waves. I could see the staircase from where I stood. Flames were licking up the banister on the left side, climbing fast, hungry. "Diane!" I shouted as loud as my lungs would allow. "Diane, we have to get out right now!" I heard her voice again, but it was moving away from me, not toward me. Moving toward the stairs. Moving down. "Preston!" I tried again. "Preston, I need help up here." The safe. Preston's voice boomed from somewhere below, sharp and focused in a way that turned my stomach. "The filing cabinet, get the contracts out of the filing cabinet first." I stepped into the hallway, and the smoke hit my lungs like a fist. I coughed so hard my knees buckled, and that was when it happened. The ceiling above the doorway to Margaret's old sewing room, the room we had never converted, the room I kept exactly as she left it, gave a sound like a gunshot. A support beam cracked and dropped. It caught me across the left leg just above the ankle. The pain was immediate and absolute, the kind that shuts down rational thought entirely. I went down hard onto the hallway floor, both hands splayed out in front of me, cheek pressed against wood that was almost too hot to touch. I tried to pull my leg free. It did not move. "Diane." My voice had dropped to something I barely recognized. "Diane, please. I am up here. I cannot move." I heard footsteps below. Fast footsteps, moving toward the front door. "He's still up there." That was Diane's voice, and for one lurching second my heart lifted because she had heard me. She knew I was still up here. Then Preston's voice came back flat and certain. "There's nothing we can do." 4 words. He said them the way you might say the weather has turned or the milk has gone bad. A simple statement of fact requiring no further discussion. I pressed my palm against the hot floor and pushed with everything I had. The beam did not shift. The smoke was banking down lower now, compressing toward the floor where I lay, and every breath I pulled in felt like breathing through a wet wool blanket soaked in ash. I could hear Max barking outside. Sharp, excited barks. The dog was already safe. I thought about Margaret then. I do not know why the mind does what it does in moments like that, but I saw her face as clearly as I have ever seen anything, the way she looked on our wedding day, standing at the end of that church aisle in Knoxville with her hands folded in front of her and her eyes already wet before I had even reached her. I heard her voice the way I had not heard it in 11 years. Arthur. Just my name the way only she said it. I pulled my hand into a fist and knocked it against the floor. Once. Then again. Then a third time, slower, weaker, because the smoke was doing something to my arms that I could not fight. The sirens came from a long way off, at first a thin wail that grew thicker as it got closer, overlapping with itself, until it filled the night outside. Red and white lights strobed through the hallway window, painting the smoke in colors that almost looked beautiful if you did not know what they meant. I knocked again, softer now. The front door downstairs was open. I could feel the draft even from up here. Someone had left it open on their way out. Hey! A new voice, young male, carrying the controlled urgency of training. Anybody still in the building, call out if you can hear me. I knocked. Just that. Just my knuckle against the burning floor one more time with what I had left. Boots on the stairs. Heavy, fast, deliberate. A flashlight beam cut through the smoke above me and then dropped down to find my face. I got him, second floor hallway. He is trapped under debris. The young firefighter dropped to one knee beside me and I saw his face through the visor, young, maybe 30, jaw set hard with concentration. His name badge read, Reed. Sir, can you hear me? I need you to stay awake. What is your name? Arthur, I managed. Arthur Hollis. Okay, Arthur. I am Caleb. I am going to get you out of here. Can you feel your leg? I can feel it, I said, which was the understatement of my 72 years on this earth. Caleb radioed for backup, then got his hands under the beam and lifted with his entire body. I felt the pressure shift, grabbed the wall, and dragged myself forward on pure stubbornness. The burn that tore up my leg in that moment is not something I will describe, because some pain does not need words. We came out the front door together, him half carrying me, my arm across his shoulders, both of us coughing hard enough to crack ribs, and the cold March air of Nashville hit my face like a blessing. I saw them immediately. Diane stood on the front lawn in her robe, Max pressed against her chest, the dog's tail wagging. Preston stood 6 feet away, a leather duffel bag at his feet, his phone already out and glowing. Diane looked at me the way you look at something you did not expect to see. Not with relief, with the particular expression of a person whose calculation has just been interrupted. Preston looked at the duffel bag, then back at me. Then he said very quietly to no one in particular, "How did he make it out?" I heard it. Through the ringing in my ears and the roar of the fire behind me and the shouts of the arriving crew, I heard those 6 words, and I understood them with a clarity that the smoke had not managed to take from me. Caleb was calling for the paramedics. Someone was putting an oxygen mask over my face. The lawn was cold and wet against my back. I looked up at the Tennessee sky, and I thought they did not come back for me. They chose the dog and the filing cabinet, and they did not come back for me. And then the darkness took me before I could decide what to do with that. Sound first, the shriek of a saw, Somewhere close, a radio crackling coordinates, boots on gravel, someone counting aloud in the flat, professional rhythm of a person who counts to keep panic away from the door. Then cold. The March air of Nashville pressing down on my face like a damp cloth, the kind of cold that registers as kindness when every other sensation is fire. Then pain. My left leg announced itself with the full-throated conviction of something that had been waiting for my attention and was not going to be ignored any longer. I opened my eyes to a sky full of smoke and spinning red light. "He is back with us," Caleb's voice close to my right ear. "Arthur, look at me. Right here." I turned my head and found his face, the oxygen mask, still in his hand. His own face streaked with soot above the line of his visor. He looked younger than I had first thought. Maybe 30, maybe a little less. The kind of young where the exhaustion has not yet settled permanently into the skin. "The beam," I said. My voice sounded like gravel in a tin can. "We got it off you. You are out. You are safe." He held up 2 fingers. "How many?" "2. I am not concussed, son. I am just old." I tried to push myself up, and his hand came down firmly on my shoulder. "Stay down, sir. Paramedics are 1 minute out." "My daughter," I started. "She is on the lawn. She is fine." Something in the way he said it made me look past him toward the front of the house. The crew was working the facade now, 2 hoses running the upstairs windows, blowing out one by one in small explosions of glass and black smoke. On the lawn, separated from the organized chaos by the invisible line that civilians instinctively do not cross, Diane stood with Max still clamped to her chest. The dog had stopped barking. He was licking her face with the cheerful dedication of an animal that had no idea what had almost happened. Preston stood 3 feet from her, the leather duffel at his feet. He was on his phone. Not calling 911. That call had already been made. He was talking to someone else, his free hand gesturing with the kind of decisive energy you use when you are reorganizing something. Caleb followed my gaze. Something shifted behind his eyes, but he did not say anything about it. "You are going to need surgery on that leg," he said instead, pulling his attention back to me with the practiced redirect of someone who has learned when to look away from things that are not his business. "The burn is significant, but the fracture concerns me more. You are going to be off that leg for a while." "How long were you looking for me?" I asked. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "We cleared the ground floor in about 4 minutes. Standard protocol, we work room to room." He paused. "I heard the knock when I hit the base of the stairs. Barely audible. If I had gone right instead of left at the landing." He stopped himself. "How much time did I have?" I asked. He met my eyes. 30 seconds. Maybe. I let that land where it needed to land. 30 seconds. The difference between my name on a tombstone and my name on the paramedic's intake form came down to which direction a young man turned at the top of a staircase. "Your family," Caleb said carefully, and I could hear him choosing each word the way you choose your footing on wet ground. "They reported you as—" He stopped again. "As what?" He looked at me for a long moment, and his eyes were doing something complicated. "They told the first responders on scene that there was no one left in the building, that everyone was accounted for." I heard those words. I understood them. My mind filed them away with the same mechanical efficiency it had used to file away Preston's 6 words on the lawn, and I made a decision in that moment, not a dramatic decision, not the kind that comes with fanfare or anger. A quiet decision, the kind that settles into your bones and stays there. The paramedics arrived in a rush of wheels and blue nitrile gloves. A woman with her hair pulled back grabbed my wrist for a pulse while her partner started cutting the leg of my pajamas away from the burn. I turned my head away from what they were uncovering because I had enough to think about without adding that to it. Across the lawn, Diane finally looked in my direction. Our eyes met through the smoke and the spinning lights and the 30 feet of wet grass between us. Her face went through several things very quickly, shock first, then something I can only describe as recalibration. The look of a person rapidly rewriting a plan that had already been set in motion. She did not run toward me. She did not cry out. She pressed her lips together and held Max tighter against her chest, and the dog, oblivious and happy, wagged his tail. Preston ended his phone call. He looked at me, then at Caleb kneeling beside me, then back at his phone. He typed something. "Sir." The female paramedic tapped my arm. "We need to move you now. Is there anyone you want us to contact?" I thought about that question longer than she expected. There was no one. Margaret had been gone for 11 years. My brother Raymond had passed the winter before. I had colleagues, people I had built a company with over 3 decades, people who would be genuinely sorry to hear that something had happened to me. But there was no one whose phone I needed to light up in the middle of the night. And my daughter was standing 20 feet away, holding a dog and making no movement in my direction. "No," I said. "There is no one." Caleb heard that. I saw it register in his face, a small tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible shift in the set of his mouth. He stood up as they loaded me onto the stretcher, and just before they wheeled me toward the ambulance, he put one hand briefly on the rail. "I will check on you," he said. It was a simple sentence. He said it the way people say things they mean. I did not answer because the paramedic was asking me to rate my pain, and the honest answer was going to take more breath than I had available. The ambulance doors closed. Nashville disappeared behind 2 rectangles of white metal, and the last thing I saw through the small back window as we pulled away was Diane still on the lawn, watching the house burn with her chin resting on top of Max's head. She never looked at the ambulance. They transferred me to Portland 3 days after the fire. I know that because Caleb told me later. At the time, I was not tracking days. The burn unit at Vanderbilt had stabilized me enough for transport, and a specialist in Portland had a bed and a reputation with cases like mine, the kind where the leg might walk again if someone brilliant got to it early. I did not ask questions. When you are 72 years old, and the lower half of your left leg looks the way mine did, you go where they tell you and try to stay grateful. What I remember from those first days is ceiling tiles, white acoustic ceiling tiles with a water stain shaped roughly like Florida directly above the bed in room 114. I stared at that stain for most of my waking hours. It was easier than thinking. But the mind does not stop thinking because you ask it to. Where mine went every time the medication let me drift was back to a summer afternoon in Nashville in 1998. A fairground on the south side of the city. The smell of fried dough and diesel from the generators. A little girl in a yellow dress with her hair in 2 pigtails and a stuffed bear tucked under her arm. Her name was Sarah. I had called her Sunny since the day she was born because Margaret said she came into the world on the first genuinely warm morning of a cold spring, and the light in that delivery room was something neither of us ever forgot. Arthur held her hand. Margaret told me that afternoon, shifting 2-year-old Diane on her hip. "I am holding it," I said. "Hold it tighter." I remember laughing. I thought Margaret worried too much. I turned to buy water from a vendor just for a moment, barely long enough to dig the money out and make the exchange. When I turned back, Sunny was gone. The yellow dress, the pigtails, the bear. Dissolved into the moving crowd the way a single color disappears when you mix it into too many others. I called her name until my voice gave out. Margaret stood at the entrance gate for 6 hours with Diane on her hip, in case Sunny found her way back. She did not find her way back. We filed the report that night, hung flyers for 2 years, hired a private investigator for 3, held on to hope the way you hold something in moving water with everything you have until your arms give out. Margaret's arms gave out first. She did not die quickly, she faded. Grief took her appetite first, then her sleep, then her interest in anything that was not Sunny. She would sit in the doorway of Sunny's bedroom, the room I kept exactly as it was, yellow curtains, shelf of picture books, wicker basket of hair ribbons with her hands folded in her lap, waiting for something she knew was not coming. She passed on a Thursday morning in February 2012. Pneumonia, the death certificate said. I knew better. Some people, when they lose a piece of themselves that large, simply cannot find a reason to fight off ordinary things anymore. I kept the room for 11 more years. Through Diane growing up and moving out. Through the house getting quieter until I was the only sound in it. Diane used to stand in that doorway sometimes, but her expression was different from her mother's. She looked at the room the way a person looks at something that has taken something from them. You love her more than me, Diane told me when she was 17. And you don't even know if she's alive. I did not know how to answer that. I still don't. I was thinking about Diane's 17-year-old face when the door to room 114 opened. The man who walked in was tall, the kind of build that comes from physical work, rather than a gym carrying 2 paper cups of coffee with the careful concentration of someone navigating ice. He stopped when he saw my eyes were open. Good morning? He looked startled, then immediately relieved. I'm Caleb Reed. I don't know if you remember me. You turned left at the landing, I said. Something moved across his face between a laugh and a wince. He set 1 coffee cup on the tray table beside me carefully, like it mattered, and pulled the chair from the corner without being asked. I had some leave saved up, he said. I just wanted to make sure you got here okay. I looked at this young man who had followed a stranger across 2 states on his saved leave. You didn't have to do that, I said. No, he agreed. But here I am. He wrapped both hands around his cup. Black okay? I didn't know how you took it. Black is fine. I reached for the cup. My hand trembled enough that he watched it without commenting until I had a grip. Your wife came with you, Emma, and our daughter Lily, she's 8. The involuntary smile that crossed his face when he said the child's name was the kind parents produce without meaning to. Emma said nobody should be in a hospital alone if there's someone who can help it. She sounds like a good woman, I said. She's the best person I know, Caleb said, with the simple certainty of someone stating the direction of north. I looked up at the Florida-shaped stain on the ceiling. How long before I walk again? I asked. He was quiet for 2 seconds. 6 to 8 months for the fracture. The burn will take longer. 6 to 8 months. Alone in a city I did not know. Is there anyone? He began. No, I said. The same answer I had given the paramedic on the lawn. There is no one. Caleb nodded slowly without filling the silence with the uncomfortable sounds people make when they do not know what to say. He just sat there holding his coffee, occupying the chair like he had nowhere else to be. Okay, he said in a tone that meant something considerably larger than the word. Then I guess we'll figure it out. Through the window, Portland was gray and wet and entirely unfamiliar. But the coffee was hot, and there was someone in the chair. For the first morning in a very long time, that was enough. The first week I did not speak unless spoken to, and even then I kept my answers to the minimum number of words required to end the conversation. The nurses learned quickly. The day shift woman, whose name tag read Deborah, stopped asking how I was feeling after the third morning of receiving the same single-syllable answer. She would come in, check the monitors, adjust the IV line, and leave with a professional neutrality that I appreciated more than any amount of cheerful bedside manner. The night nurse was a younger man named Derek, who moved quietly and never turned the overhead light on if he could help it. I appreciated him too. What I did not know how to do was appreciate the Reed family. They were simply there. That was the part I could not process. Every morning, when the gray Portland light came through the window blinds, and I opened my eyes to another ceiling of acoustic tiles, one of them was already in the room. Sometimes it was Caleb with coffee and a folded newspaper sitting in the corner chair, reading aloud, whether I responded or not. The sports scores, the weather, a local story about a bridge being renovated on the east side. His voice was steady and unhurried, the voice of a man who had learned somewhere that silence in a hospital room is a different kind of animal than silence anywhere else, and that filling it gently was an act of basic human decency. I don't need to be read to, I told him one morning about 10 days in. I'm not an invalid. I know that, Caleb said without looking up from the paper. I'm reading because I like reading out loud. You just happen to be here. I did not have an answer for that, so I looked at the ceiling instead. Emma came in the afternoons. She was quieter than Caleb, not shy, but the kind of quiet that comes from a person who thinks before they speak and means what they say when they do. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, and the particular look of someone who managed a great many things simultaneously and made it appear effortless. She would bring food, not hospital cafeteria food, but things she had made herself packed in containers that she stacked in the small refrigerator in the corner. A covered bowl of something that smelled like garlic and thyme. Sliced fruit. Once a piece of cornbread wrapped in foil that was still faintly warm. She did not press me to eat. She put the food in the refrigerator and sat down with a book of her own and read quietly in the chair Caleb had vacated. And if I ate it, she said nothing, and if I didn't eat it, she said nothing. She came back the next afternoon with something different and did the same thing again. You don't have to keep doing this, I told her about 2 weeks in. She looked up from her book with a direct, unhurried gaze. I know, she said. Do you want me to stop? I looked at the untouched container of soup on the tray table. No, I admitted. She nodded once and went back to her book. It was Lily who broke through what nothing else could touch. She was 8 years old with her mother's dark hair and her father's directness, and she appeared in the doorway of room 114 one afternoon in early April with the focused expression of someone who had been given a mission and intended to complete it. She was carrying a small carton of chocolate milk in both hands, with the careful gravity of a person transporting something irreplaceable. Mom said I could bring this, she announced from the doorway, holding up the carton as evidence. It's the good kind, not the watery kind from the machine. I looked at her. She looked at me. She walked to the chair beside my bed and climbed up into it without being invited, settled herself with the unself-conscious confidence of a child who has not yet learned to feel unwelcome anywhere, and set the chocolate milk on the tray table. I'm Lily, she said. In case you forgot. I remember, I said. Your father mentioned you. He talks about me a lot. She said this with the matter-of-fact satisfaction of someone who considers it the natural order of things. She looked at my leg, which was elevated and wrapped and unavoidable to look at. Does it hurt? Every adult who had asked me that question in the past 3 weeks had asked it with a particular careful softness braced for the answer. Lily asked it the way she might ask if it was raining outside. direct, curious, without the flinching. "Yes," I said. She nodded, seriously absorbing this. "My dad broke his arm when I was 6. He said broken things hurt more when you pretend they don't." I looked at this child for a moment. "Your father is a wise man." "He's okay," she said, with the breezy candor that only an 8-year-old can deploy without cruelty. Then she looked at me more carefully. "Are you going to eat that soup Mom made it?" "Maybe later." "She made it twice," Lily said. "The first time she said it wasn't right and threw it out and made it again." She paused. "She does that sometimes. Makes things over until they're right." I looked at the container on the tray table. Then I reached over, pulled it toward me, and opened the lid. The smell hit me before I had time to think about it. Butternut squash and something warm underneath, cinnamon maybe, or nutmeg. A smell that had no business existing in a hospital room because it was too specifically a smell from somewhere else. From a kitchen in Nashville on a winter evening, from a woman standing at the stove with her back to me, and her hair pinned up, humming something just below the threshold of actual melody. I put the lid back down. Lily was watching me with the particular attention of a child who notices things adults assume they miss. "Does it smell bad?" she asked. "No," I said, and my voice did something I did not give it permission to do. I cleared my throat. "It smells very good." "Then how come you look like that?" "Like what?" "Like it made you sad." I set the container down on the tray table and looked at my hands for a moment. At the age spots and the burn scarring on the backs of them and the slight tremor that had started sometime in the past few years and never fully went away. "It reminded me of someone," I said. Lily considered this with appropriate seriousness. "Someone you miss." "Yes." She was quiet for approximately 4 seconds, which for an 8-year-old constitutes genuine reflection. Then she said, "Okay. Do you want me to sit here for a while? I don't have to talk if you don't want." I looked at her, this small, direct, chocolate milk-bearing person who had just offered to sit in silence with an old man she barely knew because he looked sad, and who said it the way other children say they want a snack. "Yes," I said. "I would like that." She settled back in the chair, swung her feet, which did not reach the floor, and picked up her mother's abandoned book from the side table, flipped to a random page, and began reading to herself with her lips moving slightly. I picked up the soup and ate it. By the time I finished, Lily had fallen asleep in the chair with the book open on her chest, and her sneakers still swinging faintly in some dream reflex. Emma appeared in the doorway, saw her daughter asleep, and looked at the empty soup container in my hands. She did not say anything. She just pressed her lips together in a small, quiet way, and it was not a smile exactly, but it was the shape that comes just before one. I set the empty container down. Outside the window, Portland was doing what Portland does in April, raining with a kind of steady, democratic persistence that made no distinction between important things and unimportant ones. But the soup was gone, and the child in the chair was breathing slowly and evenly, and for the first time since the night of the fire, I did not look at the ceiling and think about how much easier it would be to simply stop. That was enough. By May, Lily had turned the chair beside my bed into her personal territory. She arrived every afternoon with the reliability of a scheduled appointment backpack over one shoulder, some new object of interest in her hands, an expression of complete purposefulness that reminded me with a sharpness I was not prepared for of Sunny at that age. Not in looks, just in the quality of her attention. The way she arrived somewhere and immediately made it her own. "I brought you something," she announced one afternoon in the second week of May, dropping her backpack on the floor and pulling out a folded piece of paper with the reverence of someone presenting a legal document. I unfolded it. A drawing in crayon, three figures of varying heights, standing in front of what appeared to be a house with a large yellow circle overhead, that I understood to be the sun. The tallest figure had gray hair rendered in enthusiastic silver crayon strokes. The smallest figure had a red backpack. "That's you," Lily said, pointing to the tall, gray-haired figure. "And that's me. And that one's Mom." I looked at the drawing for a long moment. At the careful way she had given the tall figure a walking stick. At the word she had written at the bottom in large, uneven letters with the D and the I reversed the way children sometimes do. It said, family. My throat tightened so suddenly and completely that I had to look away toward the window and breathe very deliberately through my nose for several seconds before I trusted myself to speak. "You're a good artist," I said finally. Lily beamed. "I know. Ms. Patterson says I have natural talent." She said this without a trace of immodesty, the way children state facts before the world teaches them to be falsely humble about things they are genuinely good at. "You can keep it." "I intend to," I said. She climbed into her chair, pulled her math homework out of her backpack, and got to work with the focused energy of someone burning through an obstacle to get to the good part of the afternoon. I watched her for a moment, the way she chewed the end of her pencil, the way she counted on her fingers under the desk, thinking I couldn't see, and something shifted in my chest that I did not have a name for immediately. It took me 3 days to identify it as the desire to still be alive in a year. The piggy bank arrived on a Tuesday. Lily walked in, carrying it with both hands, pink ceramic painted with small white daisies, the kind of object that belongs on a shelf in a little girl's bedroom and nowhere else on earth. She set it on the tray table in front of me with a decisive thump that made the coins inside rattle. "This is for you," she said. I looked at the piggy bank, then at her. "Lily, it's mine," she said firmly, as if preempting an argument. "So I can give it to whoever I want, and I want to give it to you. I cannot take your savings." "It's not savings." She straightened up with the dignity of someone making an important distinction. "Savings is when you're keeping it for something. I already decided I'm giving it to you, so now it's just money waiting to go somewhere." I stared at this 8-year-old and her ceramic pig and her ironclad logic, and I felt something behind my eyes that I refused to let become anything more than pressure. "What were you saving it for?" I asked. She shrugged one shoulder. "Stuff." "What kind of stuff?" Another shrug. "It doesn't matter. You need it more right now." She pushed the piggy bank 1 inch closer to me in the manner of someone who considers the matter settled and picked up her library book from the side table. I picked up the piggy bank. It was heavier than I expected. I turned it over in my hands, listening to the coins shift inside, and my jaw was doing something painful that had nothing to do with my leg. "Lily," I said. She looked up. "Thank you," I said. And then, because there was no way to say the rest of it without my voice breaking entirely, I stopped there. She studied me for a moment with those direct, careful eyes. Then she said, "You're welcome, Grandpa Arthur," with the same matter-of-fact certainty she used for everything, as if she had been calling me that for years. The thing behind my eyes won. I turned toward the window so she would not see, but I was not fast enough, and she saw and she did not say anything about it, which was the most merciful thing anyone had done for me in months. She went back to her book. I looked at Portland in the May sunshine and let the tears run where they wanted and did not wipe them away because my hands were full of her piggy bank. That evening, after Lily had gone home with Caleb, Emma came back alone to collect the food containers. She moved quietly around the room, and then she stopped at the tray table and looked at the ceramic pig sitting next to my water glass. She brought that, Emma said. It was not a question. She did. Emma pressed her lips together. Her hands stilled on the container she was holding. I didn't know she still had money in it. She told me she spent it on... She stopped herself, cleared her throat. She told me she spent it on something at school. She lied to you so you wouldn't take it back, I said. Emma set the container down. She stood with her back to me for a moment, and her shoulders moved once the particular movement of someone who is keeping something inside that wants very badly to come out. I'll pay you back, she said, turning around. Every cent. Once things settle down, I'll pump Emma. I said her name and she stopped talking. Don't. She looked at me with those steady, dark eyes that always seemed to be considering more than they revealed. Keep the pig, I said. Put it back in her room tonight. And do not tell her I said that because she will bring it back tomorrow and we will have this whole argument again. A sound came out of Emma. Then half laugh, half something else, quickly controlled, and she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment. When she lowered it, her eyes were wet at the corners. Okay, she said quietly. She picked up her containers and walked to the door, and then she paused with one hand on the frame. Lily picks up piano on Thursdays, she said, not turning around. She loves it. First thing she asks when she gets home is if she can play us something. A beat. I just thought you should know that. She left before I could ask why she thought I should know that. I sat with the ceramic pig in my hands, and the drawing on the tray table and the particular knowledge settling into me like water, finding its level that something was being given up on my behalf that I had not asked for and could not yet repay. Outside, Portland moved through its evening with complete indifference. Inside room 114, I made myself a promise I intended to keep. By August, I could walk to the window and back without holding on to anything. It did not sound like much. But the first time I made it those 12 steps without gripping the wall or the IV stand or Caleb's arm, I stood at the glass and looked out at the Portland skyline and felt something I had not felt since before the fire, a small, private, uncomplicated satisfaction. The kind that has nothing to do with anyone else. The physical therapist, a brisk woman named Sandra, who did not accept excuses and did not offer them either, had upgraded me from the wheelchair to a cane 2 weeks prior. She had presented it to me with the same business-like efficiency she applied to everything and said, "You've got another 4 months of work ahead of you, Mr. Hollis, but you've earned this part." I had thanked her in the flat tone I used for most things those days, but I had held the cane a little longer than necessary before setting it against the wall. By August, I was walking to the hospital garden and back. By September, I was doing the full loop of the 3rd floor on my own twice a day, the cane tapping a rhythm on the linoleum that I had come to find almost meditative. I was not healed. I would not be healed for a long time yet, and the leg would never be fully what it had been. But I was moving. And moving, as it turned out, was the difference between a man waiting to die and a man with somewhere to go. Emma had shifted her visits in response to my improving mobility. She came less often, but stayed longer, and we had begun to have actual conversations, not the careful, limited exchanges of a caregiver and a patient, but the kind where one person says something and the other person disagrees, and neither of them apologizes for it. One afternoon in late August, she arrived with a book she had finished and wanted to argue about. "The ending is wrong," she announced, sitting down and dropping the paperback on the table between us. "He had the whole novel to do the right thing, and he didn't." "Maybe that was the point," I said. "That's what people say when they don't want to admit the writer took the easy way out." I looked at her. "That's a strong opinion." "I have strong opinions," she said with a matter-of-fact lack of apology that reminded me with unexpected force of someone. I could not place who immediately. It lingered at the edge of my mind the way a word does when it is on the tip of your tongue. It was the following week that I first noticed the rouse. Emma had come in while I was resting and set out my afternoon medication. On the tray table, 3 different pill bottles, a glass of water, and the small paper cup the hospital provided. When I opened my eyes, I saw that she had arranged them, not randomly the way anyone might set things out, but in a perfectly straight line, evenly spaced, the labels all facing the same direction. I sat up slowly and looked at the lineup on the tray table. "Emma," I said. She looked up from her book. "Did you arrange those?" She glanced at the tray table. "The bottles, I suppose I did." She looked mildly puzzled by the question. "Is that strange? Do you always do that, line things up?" She considered this with the genuine thoughtfulness she gave to most questions. "I think so. Caleb teases me about it. He says I'd line up the stars if I could reach them." A small smile. "I never really thought about it. It's just things feel more settled when they're in order." I looked at the 3 pill bottles in their perfect line and said nothing. Things feel more settled when they're in order. Margaret used to say almost exactly that. Not those words, but that meaning in her own particular way. "Arthur, the world has enough chaos, there's no reason to add to it at home." She would line up the spices on the kitchen shelf alphabetically. She would straighten the books on my nightstand when she thought I wasn't looking. It was one of those small habits that had lived so deep in the texture of my daily life that I had stopped seeing it until it was gone. I reached for my water glass and drank slowly, buying time for the expression on my face to settle into something that did not require explaining. 3 days later, Emma was adjusting the IV line that the home nurse had connected for my afternoon medication when I saw it. Her left wrist, the inside of it pale in the afternoon light that came through the window. A mark, not a scar, not a bruise. A birthmark roughly oval about the size of a thumb pressed flat. It sat just below the crease of her wrist in the exact position and approximate shape of one I had last seen on a 5-year-old girl in a yellow dress 25 years ago. My heart did not race. It stopped. There is a difference. "Emma," I said, and my voice came out perfectly level in the way that sometimes happens when the body overrides the mind in a crisis. "Your wrist." She looked down. "The birthmark, I've had it my whole life. I used to be embarrassed about it when I was little. I thought it looked like a splat." She smiled briefly. "Lily says it looks like a cloud." "Does it bother you?" I asked because I needed her to keep talking while I put my face back together. "Not anymore." She pulled her sleeve down and picked up the IV line again. "My adoptive mom used to call it my little map. She said it meant I was always supposed to find my way somewhere." The word landed in the middle of my chest, like something dropped from a height. Adoptive. She had mentioned it once before, briefly in passing. I was adopted from young. I had registered it and filed it away with the careful neutrality of a man who had learned not to let himself reach for things. But hearing it again now, with the birthmark still visible in my memory and the lined-up pill bottles still sitting in their perfect row on the tray table. "Where were you born?" I asked. The question came out before I had decided to ask it, casual in its surface tone and anything but underneath. Emma tilted her head slightly. "I don't actually know. My records were incomplete. The agency my parents worked with said there were gaps in the paperwork." She said it without obvious distress, the practiced ease of someone who had made their peace with an unanswerable question long ago. "I've always just said Tennessee because that's where the agency was based. But I don't know for certain." Tennessee. I looked at the window, at the Portland skyline going amber in the early evening light. "Are you all right?" Emma asked. She was watching me with the careful attention she gave to things that mattered. You went somewhere just now. I'm fine, I said. Just tired. She accepted this without pushing the way she accepted most things. She finished with the IV line, packed up her bag, and paused at the door. Caleb's making dinner tonight, she said. Something ambitious, he says. I'll bring you whatever survives. A dry, affectionate note in her voice that was entirely particular to the way she talked about her husband. After she left, I sat for a long time without moving. Tennessee, the birthmark, the straight lines, the particular quality of her opinions delivered without apology. The way she had made herself at home in whatever space she entered, the way she moved through the world with a certainty that came not from arrogance but from something quieter and deeper. I was not ready to name what I was thinking. I would not let myself name it yet. The distance between a possibility and a truth was a distance that had broken me once before, and I was not 25 years younger anymore. I could not survive being wrong again. But my hand went without my permission to the inside pocket of the jacket hanging on the back of my chair, to the small familiar weight that had rested there against my ribs every day for 25 years, the half of a silver chain, the half of a small silver pendant broken clean down the middle, the edge worn smooth from years of handling. I did not take it out. I just rested my fingers against it through the fabric of the jacket and sat very still while the Portland evening settled in around me. Something was shifting beneath the surface of things. I did not know yet what it was, but I had learned at 72 years old to pay attention when the ground moves under your feet, even when you cannot yet see what is about to come up through it. The fever came without warning on a Tuesday night in November. One of the secondary infections that burn recovery invites. When it feels the body has let its guard down, that was how Sandra explained it the next morning with her usual brisk efficiency. My temperature spiked to 103.8 by midnight, and the nursing staff moved with the controlled urgency that told me this was serious without anyone needing to say so. I do not remember most of that night clearly. What I remember comes in pieces the way fever memories always do, disconnected and overly bright, like photographs taken in bad light. I remember the ceiling tiles doing something they had never done before, shifting and breathing above me in the dark. I remember someone replacing the IV bag, the cool rush of fluid in my arm. I remember the window going from black to gray to pale orange as the hours passed. And I remember calling her name, Sunny. My own voice rough and cracked, pulling me briefly toward the surface. Sunny, where did you go? Then darkness again. When I came back fully, it was morning. Pale Portland light pressed through the blinds. Emma was in the chair beside my bed, not reading, not doing anything, just sitting with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on my face with the particular watchfulness of someone who has been there for a while. Good morning, she said when she saw my eyes focus. How do you feel? Like I argued with a fever and lost, I said. My voice was rough and my mouth tasted like copper. How long have you been here? Caleb called me around 2. I've been here since 3. She leaned forward and poured water from the pitcher on the tray table, held it out. Her hands were steady. Her face was doing something careful. I drank. Set the glass down. You should have gone home. Probably. She agreed in the tone that meant she had considered that option and rejected it. The room was quiet for a moment, the ordinary morning quiet of a hospital corridor outside the distant beep of monitors, the sound of a cart being wheeled somewhere down the hall. Emma picked up her cup of coffee from the floor beside her chair, the cup that had clearly been there long enough to be cold, and held it with both hands without drinking it. Who is Sunny? She asked. The question was quiet, direct. She asked it the way she asked most things, without preamble, without apology. Looking at me with those steady, dark eyes that had never once in all these months looked away from something difficult, my chest tightened with a force I had not expected. I had known somewhere below conscious thought that this question was coming. I had known it since the moment I heard my own voice in the dark. But knowing a thing is coming does not fully prepare you for the moment it arrives. "My daughter," I said. Emma's hands tightened slightly around the cold coffee cup. "I didn't know you had a daughter?" "I had two," I said. "One I lost in a fire. One I lost at a fairground in Nashville in the summer of 1998. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Emma did not fill it with noise or sympathy sounds. She sat with it the way she sat with most difficult things, directly, without flinching. She was 5, I said. Yellow dress, 2 pigtails. She had a stuffed bear that she carried everywhere, a brown bear with one ear that was always flipping the wrong way, no matter how many times I fixed it. My voice was doing something I did not have full authority over. I turned around to buy water. 2 minutes, maybe less. When I turned back, she was gone. Emma pressed her lips together. Her jaw moved once, tightening and releasing. Her name was Sarah, I said. But I called her Sunny from the day she was born. She came into the world on the first warm morning of a cold spring. I stopped, steadied myself. I have not stopped looking for her. Not once in 25 years. Emma stared at the cold coffee in her hands for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were wet at the edges, and the color had shifted in her face, not pale exactly, but something underneath the surface of her expression had moved. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Arthur, I'm so sorry. You don't need to apologize for anything." "I know. I just—" She stopped, pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth for a moment, then lowered it. "When you said the name just now in your sleep, Sunny." She said the word carefully, the way you say something you have heard before, but cannot immediately place. I don't know why, but it caught on something. My heart was performing an action in my chest that I could not accurately describe. I kept my face still by main force of will. "What do you mean?" I asked. Carefully, evenly. "I don't know exactly." Her brow pulled together, the expression of someone reaching for something in bad light. "I told you before that I don't remember much from before my adoption. It's just blank mostly, like a room with the lights off." She shook her head slightly. "But that name, when you said it just now in your sleep, I heard it, and something in me just—" She pressed a hand flat against her sternum. "Here, like a hook." I breathed, in, out, slow and deliberate. "Do you remember anything else?" I asked. The same careful, even voice. "From before the adoption, anything at all?" She thought for a long moment. Outside in the corridor, someone laughed at something, a sharp, brief sound completely indifferent to what was happening in room 114. A man's voice. Emma said quietly. "Calling me. It's the only thing I've ever been able to hold on to. Just a voice calling a name." She looked up at me. I always assumed it was my birth father, but I could never make out what the name was. It was always just out of reach. She was looking at me with a question in her eyes that she had not yet put into words. I looked back at her, at the birthmark on her wrist, at the way she lined up objects without thinking, at her Tennessee paperwork, at the steady, direct gaze that had never once asked me for anything, and I made myself breathe again. Not yet. I could not be wrong about this. I would not survive being wrong about this. Try to rest, Emma said softly, misreading my expression with characteristic generosity. She set the cold coffee down and stood up. I'll check in tonight. She squeezed my hand once before she left, brief, warm, entirely natural, and walked out without looking back. I lay in the bed and stared at Florida on the ceiling. A voice, calling a name, always just out of reach. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and closed my fingers around the half pendant. This time I did not let go. The stuffed bear had survived the fire the way Arthur Hollis had survived the fire, badly damaged but still breathing. One corner of its left ear was burned away entirely. The brown fur on its back had scorched to the darker shade, stiff and slightly brittle to the touch. Its one remaining glass eye had clouded from the heat. But the body was intact. The seams were holding, and when I had found it in the pocket of the jacket, they cut off me in the ambulance tucked there by pure habit. The way I had carried it every day for 25 years, I had pressed it against my chest in that hospital bed in Vanderbilt and not let anyone take it. It had moved with me to Portland. It lived on the shelf above the small dresser in my room in the transitional housing unit the hospital had placed me in when I graduated from inpatient care in late January. A small furnished room 3 blocks from the medical center with a window that looked out onto a parking lot and a radiator that clanked every night at 2 in the morning like it was trying to say something. It was a Thursday afternoon in February when Lily came bounding through the door of my room. She had taken to arriving with the force of weather every visit and stopped dead when she saw the bear on the shelf. "Oh," she said. The word came out soft and strange, entirely unlike her usual announcements. She stood in the middle of the room with her backpack still on and stared at the bear with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Something older than 8 years old. "Lily," I said. She crossed the room without answering and reached up, had to go onto her toes to reach, and took the bear carefully off the shelf. She held it in both hands and looked at it with the focused inward attention of someone trying to hear something, very quiet. "This is so weird," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I've seen this before." My hands tightened on the arms of my chair. "You haven't," I said. "It's been in my jacket since before you were born." "I know." She turned the bear over in her hands, examining the burned ear, the clouded eye. "I just feel like I have." She looked up at me, puzzled and a little unsettled. "Is that strange?" "No," I said, which was the truest and most incomplete answer I had ever given anyone. She held the bear for another long moment, then set it back on the shelf with the same careful reverence she had used to pick it up. She slid her backpack off, sat down on the end of my bed. She had abandoned the chair for the bed sometime in November, a territorial expansion she had accomplished, without comment, and looked at me. "Can I ask you something?" "You can always ask me something," I said. "The little girl you lost? Sunny?" She said the name without hesitation, the way children say names they have only heard once, but retained completely. "Do you think she's okay?" The question hit me somewhere behind the sternum, with the blunt precision of something thrown by someone who does not know they are throwing anything. "I do," I said after a moment. "I have always believed she was okay." Lily absorbed this with a slow nod. "Good," she said, with the simple finality of a child who considers the matter settled now that she has verified the important point. Then she pulled out her homework and got to work, and the afternoon moved on around us, and I sat in my chair and looked at the bear on the shelf and breathed. It was the following week that Emma came in the afternoon and found me looking at a photograph. I had not meant to leave it out. It was a habit of privacy I had kept for months, keeping the photographs in the bedside drawer, looking at them only alone. But I had been looking at the one of Sunny on her 2nd birthday, sitting in a high chair with cake on her face, and both arms raised in triumph, and I had not heard Emma come in. She stopped when she saw the photograph in my hands. I saw the moment she registered it, the small girl, the yellow dress she was wearing, even then, even at 2 years old, and I watched something move across her face that I could not fully read. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand. I gave her the photograph. She looked at it for a long time. Her breathing had changed, not dramatically, but the rhythm of it had shifted in the particular way that happens when the body reacts to something before the mind catches up. "Arthur," she said slowly. "Who is this?" "My daughter," I said. "Sunny." This was taken about 3 years before the fairground. Emma looked at the photograph. Then she did something that made the room feel very small. She raised her left hand and pressed her fingers against her own face, comparing something I could not see from where I sat. "She has—" Emma stopped, started again. "The way she's smiling. The left side goes up slightly higher than the right." She touched the corner of her own mouth. "Mine does that." "I know," I said quietly. Emma looked up from the photograph. Her eyes were very bright. Not wet, not yet, just intensely, alertly bright, the look of someone standing at the edge of something enormous and not yet knowing what it is. "Arthur." Her voice had gone very careful. "What are you not telling me?" I looked at her for a long moment, at the birthmark on her wrist, at the asymmetric smile, at the dark hair, and the direct gaze, and the way she lined up objects in straight rows and made butternut squash soup from a recipe she had never been taught. "I need you to go and get something for me," I said. "Something you told me you've kept since before your adoption." Emma did not move for 3 full seconds. Then she put the photograph down on the table between us very carefully and left the room without a word. She came back 7 minutes later, I counted, with a small cloth pouch in her hand. She stood in the doorway and looked at me. I reached into the pocket of my jacket hanging on the back of my chair and closed my hand around the half pendant. I held it out across the space between us. Emma crossed the room. She opened the cloth pouch and tipped the contents into her palm, a thin chain, a piece of silver broken clean down the middle, the edge worn smooth. She held it up. I held mine. The room went very quiet around us. The radiator, the parking lot outside the corridor beyond the door, all of it receding until there was only the 2 pieces of silver in 2 sets of hands, and the space between them that was suddenly vertiginously small. Emma's hand was shaking. Her chin was trembling with the effort of containing something her face was no longer able to keep inside. "Put them together," I said. My voice was barely a sound. Her hand moved toward mine. Her fingers met mine. The 2 pieces of silver touched at their broken edges and fit. Not approximately. Not close enough. They locked together with the precision of things made as one and waiting across 25 years and 2,000 miles. And every variation of loss, 2 people can accumulate to become one again. Emma made a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. Not a word. Not a name. Something from below language, from the place where the body holds what the mind has been unable to process for decades. Her knees buckled. I caught her arm. We stood there in that small, furnished room with the parking lot view, 2 people holding a piece of silver between them, while the world outside continued its complete indifference. "How long have you known?" she whispered. Her voice was wrecked, her face entirely open. "Since August," I said. "The birthmark, the way you line things up, the soup." My voice broke on the last word, and I did not try to recover it. "Your mother used to make that exact soup. I never gave that recipe to anyone. No one has that recipe." Emma pressed her free hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once hard like something seismic moving through her. I kept telling myself I was wrong, I said. I kept telling myself I could not survive being wrong about this. So I waited until I was certain. I looked at the joined pendant in our hands. I am certain. Sonny, she said. Just that one syllable spoken with the careful wonder of someone trying on a word they have always known was theirs. It cracked me open in a way the fire had not managed to. Your mother called you that from your first morning, I said. My jaw was shaking and I did not care. She said you came into the world like the first day of spring. She never stopped believing you were alive. The last letter she ever wrote me, she said, Sonny is out there somewhere, Arthur. I know it. I stopped, breathed. She died believing that. Emma was crying fully now, not the contained kind, but the deep body-involved kind that has been held back far too long. She gripped my hand with a force that surprised me, and I gripped back with everything I had. I am so sorry, I said. I let go of your hand. One moment. That is all it took. Stop. Her voice was fierce and immediate. Don't you dare spend one more second on that. Emma, you looked for me for 25 years. She pulled back to look directly at my face, her eyes red and wet and absolutely certain. You kept my room. You kept the bear. You kept the chain. Her voice cracked and steadied. You never stopped. That is not something you apologize for. That is something you survived. The door opened quietly. Caleb stood in the doorway. He took in Emma's face, the joined pendant, my expression with the rapid, wordless comprehension of a man who has spent years reading situations in burning buildings in seconds. He did not speak. He stepped back, pulled the door almost closed, and sat down in the hallway. I heard the wall creak as he leaned against it. That was all. He simply sat down outside and stayed there. Emma looked toward the nearly closed door, then back at me. A sound came out of her that was half sob, half laugh, broken and incredulous. That's Caleb, she said. I know, I said. We sat on the edge of my bed, not gracefully, two people too unsteady to stand, and Emma leaned her head against my shoulder, and I put my arm around her. We stayed like that while the Portland evening settled in. She told me things. Fragments of childhood, of adoption, of a family that raised her with genuine kindness, but could never fill the shapeless space she had always carried. The feeling of being slightly out of place, her entire life like a photograph, hung 1 degree off-center. The moment she met Caleb at 22, and understood immediately that he was the kind of person who stayed, and how much that specific quality had mattered to her without her ever being able to say why. I told her about Margaret, about the 11 years after, about building the company because grief leaves behind an energy that has to go somewhere. We talked until the room was fully dark, and neither of us moved to turn on the light. At some point I heard Caleb shift in the hallway and say quietly into his phone, "She's okay. We're okay. Tell Lily that Grandpa Arthur found something he lost." In the morning, Lily arrived at 7:15 with chocolate milk, and her drawing the 3 figures with the yellow sun, the one that said "family" across the bottom. She climbed between us on the bed, looked at Emma's red eyes and my red eyes, and said with complete practicality, "Did you both cry?" "Yes," Emma said. "Good," Lily said, settling back with her chocolate milk. "Dad says crying means something matters." She handed me the milk to hold while she adjusted the pillow. I held it and looked at my daughter beside me and my granddaughter between us in the gray Portland morning, and I thought about Margaret's letter, about yellow dresses and stuffed bears and 25 years of a chain worn in 2 pieces. She knew. Margaret knew. And then I stopped thinking and just stayed there in the only moment that had ever mattered. Before I take you back to Nashville, comment, I'm staying, so I know you are with me. What you are about to find out about what happened to Arthur's house, his company, and the room he kept untouched for 25 years, it is not easy to hear. This story carries fictional elements woven in for clarity and impact. If this kind of content is not what you came for, now is a gentle moment to step away. I learned what happened to my house, the same way I learned most things during those 2 years in Portland, through a phone screen in the dark alone. Carol Whitfield had been my neighbor for 19 years. She was 78, sharp as a tack, and possessed of the particular quality that longtime neighbors develop when they have watched enough of each other's lives go by. She noticed everything, forgot nothing, and kept her own counsel until keeping it became a disservice to someone she cared about. She called me 6 weeks after the fire. I had given Caleb my number to pass along, not expecting anyone to use it. When Carol's name appeared on my screen at 8:30 on a Tuesday evening, I sat up in my hospital bed and pressed the phone to my ear so hard it left a mark. "Arthur Hollis," she said without preamble. "I knew you weren't dead. I told Dorothy next door, I said that man is too stubborn to die in a fire." My throat closed entirely. I sat there and breathed through my nose for 3 seconds before I could answer her. "Hello, Carol," I said. She cried. I had never heard Carol Whitfield cry in 19 years of neighborly acquaintance, and the sound of it undid something in me that I had been holding very carefully in place. "They had a service," she said when she had collected herself. 2 weeks after, Diane stood at the podium in a black dress and talked about what a devoted father you were. Her voice went flat and precise in the way of someone delivering facts they find personally offensive. She cried beautifully. Half the street was there. I was not. "Carol, I am not finished." She took a breath. "They moved in 11 days after the service. Diane and that husband of hers. I watched the moving truck pull up to your house, Arthur. I watched them carry furniture in at 10 o'clock in the morning, like they were moving into a place they had always owned. I pressed my hand flat against the mattress beside me and said nothing. She threw Margaret's things out," Carol said. "Boxes and boxes. I went over the next morning before the truck came and I took what I could carry, Arthur. The wedding photograph from the hallway. A few of Margaret's books. I have them here. I have been keeping them for you. The wedding photograph. The one that had hung in the hallway for 31 years, Margaret in her cream dress, me in the suit I had borrowed from my brother Raymond because I could not afford my own. Thank you, I said, and the 2 words were entirely insufficient and entirely all I had. There is more, Carol said. I want you to know everything. She told me about the room. Sonny's room, the yellow curtains, the shelf of picture books, the wicker basket of hair ribbons that I had kept untouched for 25 years. Diane had it repainted within the first month. Pale gray. She told Carol it was going to be a dressing room. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. Carol told me about the sign on the building the company I had built across 30 years started in a rented office on Commerce Street with 2 employees and a second-hand copier. Preston had removed the name Hollis from the signage by the end of the first quarter. The new name was Walsh and Associates, as if I had never existed, as if 30 years of my life had been a placeholder waiting for his name to replace it. He was on the local business segment, Carol said. Channel 4. Talking about how he had saved the company's records the night of the fire. He said, she paused and I could hear her controlling something. He said it was what you would have wanted. And Diane? I asked. She was on the same segment 2 weeks later. Carol's voice was careful now. She talked about you. She said you pushed her toward the exit before the beam came down. She said you sacrificed yourself for your family. The silence on the line lasted exactly 4 seconds. She said that, I said. On camera, with tears. Carol's voice was as dry as old paper. Arthur, I have the recording if you need it. Save it, I said. Save everything. I heard her exhale a long, slow breath that carried something that might have been relief. I was hoping you'd say that. She told me one more thing before we hung up. Preston had published a book, a slim volume available at the local Barnes & Noble on West End Avenue titled The Night That Forged Us Leadership Lessons from Crisis. The cover featured a photograph of Preston in a dark suit, looking thoughtfully into the middle distance. I asked Carol to buy me a copy and mail it to Portland. It arrived 10 days later. I read it in one sitting. Preston had written 4,000 words about the importance of decisive action under pressure of protecting what matters when everything is on fire. He had dedicated it to the memory of Desmond Arthur Hollis, beloved father and patriarch, whose sacrifice inspired this work. My name. In the dedication of a book written by the man who had grabbed a bag of files and run. I set the book on the shelf above the dresser beside the burned bear. Then I picked up my phone and called Emma. She answered on the second ring. I need to ask you something, I said. When I am ready to go back to Nashville, and I will be ready soon, will you and Caleb come with me? A pause. Brief. Yes, Emma said. No hesitation, no questions, just yes. There are things I need to do before I can do the thing I actually need to do, I said. It will take time, months maybe. I need to be patient, and I am not naturally a patient man. I know, she said. I could hear the particular quality of her voice that meant she was smiling. But you kept half a silver chain in your jacket pocket for 25 years. I think you know how to wait for something that matters. I looked at the book on the shelf, at the burned bear beside it. Get some sleep, I told her. We have work to do. I am not a lawyer. I want to be clear about that because what I did over the following 4 months was not legal strategy. It was the methodical work of an old man with a specific grievance and enough time on his hands to be dangerous. Caleb helped. He did not ask many questions about why, which told me he had already worked out most of the answers on his own. He drove. He made phone calls to people who were more likely to talk to a former firefighter than to an elderly stranger. He sat in waiting rooms with me and read old magazines with the patient composure of a man who had learned that some of the most important things in life happen in waiting rooms. We started with the fire department. The Nashville Fire Department maintains incident reports for every call, and those reports are public record in the state of Tennessee. Caleb knew this because he worked inside the same system in Portland, and he walked me through the request process, a standard public records form submitted in writing, which the department has 10 business days to fulfill under Tennessee state law. The report arrived 14 days later, which was 4 days late. But I was not in a position to complain about bureaucratic timing. It confirmed the basics. The call had come in at 11:47 p.m. Units arrived at 11:59. One civilian rescued from the second floor by firefighter Caleb Reed at 12:04 a.m. The report also noted in the flat administrative language that government documents use to describe extraordinary things that 2 other civilians had self-evacuated prior to department arrival and were located on the front lawn upon units reaching the scene. Self-evacuated, as if they had made a reasonable choice in a difficult situation. I read that phrase 3 times. Then I set the report down and asked Caleb if he would be willing to write a supplementary statement, not for the report, but for my own records. About what I saw when I came out, he said. It was not a question. About what you saw, I confirmed. He wrote 4 pages. Single-spaced. He described in the careful sequential language of a trained first responder exactly what he had observed on the front lawn of my house at 12:04 a.m. on the morning of March 9, 2023. He noted the positions of both civilians. He noted what each of them was holding. He noted that neither of them was moving toward the building when he emerged with me. He noted the specific words he heard Preston say. He gave me the statement without reading it back to me. He just handed it across the kitchen table in the small apartment we had all moved into together by July of 2024. Because the transitional housing unit had been a temporary arrangement, and Emma had simply announced one evening that the arrangement they were making permanent was a different one. I had not argued. The security camera footage came from 2 sources. Carol had a doorbell camera that she had installed 2 years prior at the insistence of her grandson, and it covered a partial view of my front lawn. The footage from the night of the fire showed with the particular unflattering clarity of low-resolution night vision the moment Diane emerged from the front door with Max against her chest, followed 30 seconds later by Preston with the duffel bag. The camera continued recording for 11 more minutes. Neither of them moved toward the house during those 11 minutes. The second source was the fire department's own recording equipment, a dashboard camera on engine 14 which had captured the scene on arrival. Caleb submitted a formal request for that footage through departmental channels, citing his direct involvement in the rescue as grounds for access. It took 6 weeks and 2 follow-up calls, but it came. The engine camera showed the front lawn at 12:02 a.m. 2 minutes before Caleb brought me out. Preston was on his phone. Diane was sitting on the front steps with Max in her lap. I watched that footage 4 times on Caleb's laptop. Then I closed the laptop and went to stand at the kitchen window for a while. The hospital records required Emma's help because accessing medical records in another state involves a release authorization that the patient must sign. I signed it. The Portland Burn and Trauma Center released 14 months of intake and visitation logs. The visitation log was the document I needed. It showed in chronological order every visitor who had signed in to see Arthur Hollis in room 114 between March 2023 and May 2024. Caleb Reed, Emma Reed, Lily Reed, Sandra Torres, my physical therapist, Dr. Ambrose, my surgeon, Diane Hollis, 0 entries. Preston Walsh, 0 entries. I gave the visitation log to Carol when she flew out to Portland in September, the first time she had been on a plane in 11 years. She informed me, and she wanted me to know she had done it for this specific purpose and no other. She tucked the documents into the large manila envelope she had brought with her and added it to the collection she had been maintaining in a fireproof box under her bed in Nashville since the night of the fire. I knew I'd need to keep things safe, she said over coffee at Emma's kitchen table. I didn't know exactly what for, but I knew. Lily was doing her homework at the other end of the table. She looked up at Carol with the direct assessment she gave to all new arrivals. Are you Grandpa Arthur's friend? 19 years worth, Carol said. Lily considered this. That's a long time. She went back to her homework. You can stay for dinner if you want. Carol looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup with an expression that was for Carol Whitfield practically sentimental. You have good people around you, she said quietly. I know, I said. By October, I had a folder 4 inches thick sitting on the kitchen shelf next to Preston's book and the burned bear. Incident reports, supplementary statements, camera footage on an encrypted drive, visitation logs, Carol's collected evidence from Nashville, Caleb's written account. Everything documented, everything dated, everything true. I picked up the gold-embossed invitation that had arrived 2 weeks prior, heavy cream cardstock, the kind that costs more than it should, and read it for what must have been the 30th time. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Walsh & Associates, formerly Hollis Construction and Development. An evening of recognition and renewal. Omni Nashville Hotel Grand Ballroom, March 15, 2025. I set it on top of the folder. 5 months. I had 5 months to wait, and I had learned at 73 years old with a burned leg and a 4-inch folder of truth that 5 months was nothing. I had waited 25 years for Sunny. 5 months was nothing at all. Nashville in October smells like cooling asphalt, and the last of the summer's humidity finally giving up the fight. I had forgotten that smell. Or rather, I had not allowed myself to remember it, the particular quality of Tennessee air in the fall, something between relief and resignation, the way a long-held breath finally releases. I stepped off the plane at Nashville International on the 14th of October with my cane and my carry-on bag and the 4-inch folder in a leather document case, and the air hit me like something I had been holding at arm's length for 19 months. Carol picked me up at arrivals. She had wanted to make a sign. I had told her firmly no sign. She had compromised by wearing a bright yellow cardigan that was visible from 30 feet away. "You look thinner," she said when I reached her. "You look exactly the same," I said. "And that is either a compliment or an insult, and I have decided it's a compliment." She took my document case without asking and led me toward the parking structure with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had been waiting 19 months to be useful and intended to make the most of it. She had found me a furnished apartment on Damonbrunn Street. 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, a window that faced west toward the city rather than east toward the neighborhood where my house stood. I had been specific about that. I was not ready to look at my house. Not yet. The corner booth at Fido Coffee on Hillsborough Village became my office. I was there every morning by 7:30. The staff learned my order by the 3rd day: black coffee, no food, 1 refill, and the corner booth by the window if it was available, which it always was, at 7:30, because nobody reasonable is fully operational at 7:30. I brought the Nashville Business Journal and a legal pad. I took notes in the margins of the paper, which the waitress found eccentric, but did not comment on. Walsh & Associates occupied a building on Commerce Street 3 blocks from Fido. I could see the entrance from my corner booth if the light was right. The new signage was exactly as Carol had described: brushed steel letters, modern font, no trace of the name I had put on that building in 1994 with a check that represented most of what Margaret and I had saved in the first 10 years of our marriage. I watched the building for 2 weeks before I did anything else. I watched Preston arrive each morning at 8:50. Never 9, never 8:45. Always 8:50, with the performative precision of a man who wanted to appear punctual without actually being early. He drove a car that cost more than the annual salary of half his staff. He held the door for no one. I watched Diane arrive separately 40 minutes later in her own vehicle. She had taken to wearing her hair differently, shorter, more structured. The kind of haircut that signals a woman who has decided she is now in charge of something. She greeted the receptionist by name, but did not stop to talk. She went straight to the elevator. On the 4th Wednesday of October, I walked into the building, not into Walsh & Associates, into the lobby, which was technically a shared commercial space. I sat in one of the leather chairs near the elevator bank and read my newspaper for 25 minutes. 3 of my former employees came through the lobby in that time. The first 2 did not recognize me. I was thinner. I had the cane I had not shaved as carefully as I once had. The third one, a project manager named Gerald, who had worked for me for 11 years, stopped in his tracks and stared. I shook my head very slightly. Gerald's face went through approximately 6 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Then he nodded, once looked away, and walked to the elevator without breaking stride. I called him that evening. She let half the original staff go in the first 6 months. Gerald said, his voice low even though he was at home. The people who stayed, they don't ask questions. The ones who left, they signed NDAs, Arthur. Non-disclosure agreements. She had her attorney draw them up before she issued the terminations. Non-disclosure agreements. For employees of a company that was not hers to begin with. Did you sign one? I asked. My termination was listed as a resignation, Gerald said. She told me I could either resign or be let go for performance issues. I resigned. A pause. I didn't sign anything. Good, I said. I met with Gerald twice more over the following 3 weeks, once at Fido, once at a diner on Nolansville Pike, where neither of us was likely to run into anyone from Commerce Street. He gave me what he knew, budget irregularities he had noticed before his departure, vendors who had been replaced by companies he did not recognize, a renovation project that had been approved for a cost that did not match any legitimate contractor estimate he had ever seen. I added his account to the folder. It was 5 inches thick now. On a Thursday in late November, Diane walked past Fido on her way to what I would later learn was a lunch meeting at a restaurant 2 doors down. She was on her phone, gesturing with her free hand, her voice inaudible through the glass. She walked directly past my corner booth window without looking in. I watched her pass and felt nothing violent, nothing hot. Just the cold, clear assessment of a man looking at a problem he has already solved and is simply waiting to implement. That evening, I called Emma. "How are you doing?" she asked. She always asked first. Every call without exception. "I'm ready," I said. A pause. "Ready for what specifically?" "To stop watching and start finishing," I said. "I need you and Caleb in Nashville by March. I need Lily here too." "Lily will need to miss a week of school," Emma said. "I know." "She'll be delighted," Emma said, and I heard the smile in it and the steadiness beneath the smile. "We'll be there." I looked out the window at the Nashville night, the lights on Lower Broadway in the distance, the familiar geography of a city that had gone on without me and was about to find out it had made a significant miscalculation. I left a $20 bill on the table and picked up my cane. The corner booth had served its purpose. It was time to move. 2 years to the day. I had not planned it that way, deliberately. The date was theirs, not mine. They had chosen March 15th for the anniversary celebration because it fell on a Saturday, and because the Omni Nashville Hotel had availability, and because nobody at Walsh & Associates had stopped to consider that the 15th of March was exactly 2 years after the night they had left a man to die on the 2nd floor of his own house. But I had noticed. And I had let the coincidence stand because some things arranged themselves better than you could have arranged them on purpose. I was up before 5. I sat at the kitchen table in the Demon Brune apartment with a cup of coffee I did not drink and Margaret's wedding photograph propped against the wall in front of me. Carol had brought it back from Portland when she flew home in September. She had polished the frame. It sat on my kitchen table most mornings, but on this particular morning I had positioned it deliberately at an angle where the early light caught the silver frame, and Margaret's face was clear. "Today's the day," I said to her. She did not answer. She never did. But she had a particular expression in that photograph the moment just before the ceremony began, when she had seen me at the end of the aisle, and her face had broken into the smile that was only ever for me. And this morning, that expression seemed for no rational reason like a response. Emma and Caleb had driven down from Portland 3 days earlier. They were staying at Carol's house, which Carol had offered without being asked, and furnished with the thoroughness of a woman who had been planning this arrangement since October. Lily had her own room complete with a ceramic pig on the nightstand that Carol had produced from somewhere without explanation. They arrived at my apartment at 8 o'clock. All three of them. Lily walked in first, looked at me in my vest and dress shirt, and said, "You look nice, Grandpa Arthur. You combed your hair different." "I did," I said. "It's good," she said with the authority of someone whose opinion on these matters was final. Caleb shook my hand when he came in a solid two-pump handshake that said more than the words that came with it. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Ask me tonight," I said. Emma came in last. She stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at me with those steady, dark eyes, and her jaw was set in the particular way I had come to recognize as Emma Reed preparing herself for something difficult. She crossed the room and put both arms around me, brief and firm. "Margaret would be here if she could," she said quietly against my shoulder. My throat did something I did not permit to go further. "She is," I said. Carol arrived at 8:30 with the document case, the folder now 6 inches thick, transferred into a professional leather binder that Carol had purchased specifically for this occasion. She set it on the table beside Margaret's photograph and smoothed the front of her own dress with both hands. "Ready?" she asked. I picked up my cane. I picked up the binder. I looked around the kitchen at these 4 people, the neighbor who had kept my wedding photograph safe for 2 years, the firefighter who had turned left instead of right, the daughter I had lost, and found the granddaughter who had handed me back the will to live one chocolate milk at a time. "Yes," I said. The Omni Nashville Hotel Grand Ballroom was exactly as I had known it would be, because I had been inside it once before 20 years ago at an industry dinner, where I had received an award for commercial development that I had been obscurely proud of, and Margaret had teased me about for weeks afterward. The ceilings were high. The chandeliers were the kind that cost more than most people's cars. The room held 300 people comfortably, and tonight it was at capacity. We entered through the service entrance at 7:15. The event had begun at 7, and the registration tables out front were still processing the first wave of guests when we slipped through the back. A member of the hotel events staff, a young man named Derek, who had been briefed by Carol's contact at the hotel management office, walked us to the staging area behind the main curtain at the back of the ballroom. From there I could see the room filling. I could see the tables with the gold centerpieces and the Walsh and Associates branding on every surface, the napkins, the programs, the projection screen currently displaying a scrolling slideshow of company milestones. I could see the stage at the front set with a podium and 2 chairs, and a large floral arrangement in white and gold. And I could see Diane. She was at the center of the room, near the main entrance, wearing a deep red dress, moving through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had spent 2 years learning to inhabit a role. She shook hands. She laughed at the right moments. She touched people's arms when she spoke to them, the calculated warmth of a person performing connection rather than feeling it. Preston stood 10 feet away, holding a glass of champagne and speaking with 2 men in dark suits who had the look of investors or bankers or both. Lily stood beside me behind the curtain and slipped her hand into mine without being asked. "Are you nervous?" she whispered. "No," I said. Which was the truth. I had been nervous for 2 years. The nervousness had burned itself out somewhere around February, leaving behind something cleaner and colder and entirely functional. "Good," Lily whispered. She squeezed my hand once and let go because she understood, in the way she seemed to understand most things, that I needed both hands free. Out in the ballroom, the house lights dimmed slightly. A master of ceremonies in a dark suit stepped to the podium, tapped the microphone, and waited for the room to settle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice rolling out warm and practiced over the crowd. Welcome to the 25th anniversary celebration of Walsh and Associates. Tonight, we honor a legacy of excellence, resilience, and family. The room applauded. And now, the MC continued, his voice lifting, it is my tremendous honor to invite the founder of this remarkable legacy to the stage. He meant Diane. The spotlight swung toward the front of the room where she was standing, already moving forward with a smile arranged perfectly on her face. I stepped out from behind the curtain. The spotlight caught me before Diane reached the stage, caught the cane, the dress shirt, the burn scars visible above my collar, where I had not bothered to hide them. It caught the face of a man who had been reported dead for 2 years, walking with deliberate, unhurried steps down the center aisle of a room full of people who believed he was in the ground. The MC's voice stopped mid-sentence. The applause died as if someone had thrown a switch. 300 people turned, and from the front of the room, I heard the sharp, percussive sound of a wireless microphone hitting the ballroom floor. Diane had dropped it. 300 people held their breath at the same time. I have never been in a room where that happened. The sound it makes is not silence. It is something denser than silence, a pressure, a collective suspension, the feeling of a held thing waiting to drop. I walked down the center aisle and did not hurry. My cane struck the polished floor every other step. The only sound in the room beyond the ventilation system and the distant clink of an abandoned champagne glass. I kept my eyes forward. I did not look at the faces turning to follow me or at the phones coming up as people reached the same disbelieving conclusion. I looked at Diane. She had not moved from where she stood when she dropped the microphone. Frozen, the particular stillness of a person whose mind is running at full speed and whose body has temporarily lost contact with it. Her face had gone the color of the white tablecloths. Both hands were pressed flat against her sides, fingers splayed. Preston had set down his champagne. His knuckles were white on the back of a chair. I reached the stage. The MC stepped back from the podium without being asked, the instinctive retreat of a man who has correctly identified that the situation has left his area of competence. I set my binder on the podium and adjusted the microphone. The room was still not breathing. "Good evening," I said. My voice came out steady. I had not been entirely certain it would. "My name is Arthur Hollis. Most of you know that name. Some of you knew me personally. All of you received an invitation tonight to celebrate 25 years of a company I built." I paused. I want to thank whoever chose the date because 2 years ago tonight was also the last evening I spent in this city. The murmur that moved through the room was not polite. It was the sound of 300 people recalibrating simultaneously. Before I say anything else, I said, "I would like to show you something." I nodded toward Derek at the audiovisual station. The projection screen went dark for 2 seconds. Then it came to life. Security camera footage looks the same whether it is capturing something ordinary or something that permanently changes a person's understanding. The same flat night vision quality. The same timestamp ticking in the upper corner. March 9th, 2023. 11:59 p.m. My house. The front lawn. Smoke already pouring from the upper windows. The room watched Diane come through the front door, with Max pressed against her chest, moving fast, not looking back. 30 seconds later, Preston came through with the leather duffel bag swinging from his right hand, also not looking back. The front door swung shut behind him. Then the audio layered in. My own voice came through the ballroom speakers. Rough, diminished, unmistakable. "Why, help me, please, somebody help me." Nobody in the room moved. The timestamp kept running. 12:02 a.m., 12:03. 2 people, 1 dog, 1 bag. Preston's phone glowing in his hand. No movement toward the house. I pressed pause. Diane made a sound I will not attempt to describe precisely. It was the sound of a person discovering that the floor they have been standing on for 2 years is not floor. That footage, I said, was provided by my neighbor of 19 years, Carol Whitfield, whose doorbell camera captured the scene on arrival. The audio is from Engine 14's dashboard recording, obtained through a standard public records request under Tennessee state law. I opened the binder. I would like to introduce 2 people. Caleb walked forward from the left side of the ballroom, unhurried, grounded the way he moved through everything. He stopped beside the stage. "My name is Caleb Reed," he said, projecting without a microphone the way 15 years in burning buildings teaches a man to project. "Firefighter, Portland Fire and Rescue, formerly Nashville Fire Station 7. On March 9, 2023, I entered the second floor of that building at 12:04 a.m. and located Mr. Arthur Hollis trapped under a collapsed beam." He looked at the room directly. The 2 individuals on that footage had been standing on the front lawn for a minimum of 5 minutes before I brought him out. He stepped back. From the right side of the room, a woman in her 60s walked forward, the composed bearing of someone accustomed to giving testimony in difficult circumstances. Patricia Odom, 22 years at the Portland Burn and Trauma Center. Primary floor nurse on Arthur Hollis's case, March through June 2023. During the 14 months Mr. Hollis was under care at our facility, Patricia said in the precise, unhurried voice of a medical professional who understands the weight of exact language. The visitor log recorded 0 visits from anyone identifying themselves as immediate family. She paused. 0. The individuals listed as next of kin were notified of his admission within 48 hours of arrival. They did not come. Preston shoved back from the table. His chair scraped the floor like tearing paper. "These are paid actors," he said, his voice loud and entirely unsteady. "This entire thing is fabricated. I will have my attorney here before this evening is over." Preston. My voice through the microphone was quiet, considerably quieter than his, which is precisely why the room heard mine. He stopped. "Sit down," I said. He did not sit, but he stopped talking, which was the more important thing. I turned back to 300 faces that had just watched 2 years of a carefully maintained false narrative come apart in under 15 minutes. 2 minutes of footage and 2 short testimonies, and the entire architecture of the lie was rubble on the ballroom floor. "I am not finished," I said. "There is one more person I would like you to meet." She came from the right side of the stage, 8 years old, dark hair pulled back the way Emma always pulled it back when she wanted it out of Lily's face. Her good dress, the dark blue one she had worn to Carol's church the previous Easter, and declared acceptable, which from Lily constituted high praise. She was carrying my cane in both hands, held horizontally in front of her, like something ceremonial. She had insisted on this part 2 weeks ago, when I had walked all of them through what the evening would look like. Lily had listened with the focused attention she gave to important things, and then said simply, "I want to bring you your cane." I had told her she did not need to do that I would already have my cane. She had looked at me with the expression she reserved for adults who were missing the point. "I know," she said, "but I want to walk out and give it to you, so everyone can see." I had not argued. She stopped in front of me, held the cane out with both hands, looked up at my face and said 2 words into the nearest microphone, clear and unhurried, the way she said everything that mattered. "Grandpa Arthur." Her voice carried across the room with the particular clarity that children's voices have in large spaces, pure and unaffected, and entirely unaware of the effect it produces. 300 people made a sound, not applause, not words. The involuntary collective sound of 300 human beings responding to something that has bypassed every defense they brought with them into the room and landed directly in the part of them that is just animal and breathing and alive. I took the cane from her hands. I placed my free hand on her shoulder very briefly. She looked up at me with those direct, unfrightened eyes and gave me the nod that meant she was ready and stepped to the side. I looked out at the room. Then I looked at Diane. She was staring at Lily with an expression I had never seen on my younger daughter's face. Not rage, not calculation. Something beneath both of those things, something raw and unwilling that had broken through the surface before she had a chance to prevent it. Her hand was pressed against her mouth. Her eyes were wet. I did not speak to her yet. I spoke to the room. "This child's name is Lily Reed," I said. "She is 8 years old. Her father is Caleb Reed, the man who spoke to you a few minutes ago. Her mother's name is Emma." I paused. 14 months ago, while I was in a hospital bed in Portland, Oregon, Lily Reed broke open her piggy bank and brought the money to me. Every dollar and quarter and dime she had saved. She put it on my tray table and told me I needed it more than she did. My voice was doing something I allowed it to do. She was right. I did need it. Not the money. What I needed was what the money meant, which was a child who had no obligation to me, no history with me, no reason in the world to give a stranger the contents of her piggy bank, and did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. I let that land. Lily also stopped taking piano lessons. I continued. She loved piano. She was good at it according to her teacher, who used the phrase, natural talent. A brief, involuntary thing moved through the room, not quite laughter, not quite a sigh. She stopped because the lesson fees were money that could go toward my medical bills instead. She did not tell her parents. She told them she had decided she did not want to go anymore. I looked at Lily standing to my right, with her hands clasped in front of her. I found out 4 months later. She has never once mentioned it since. Lily was studying her shoes, with the focused attention of someone who had not anticipated being the subject of this particular paragraph, and was managing it by looking at something else. Shakawa. Her parents, I said, used the money they had set aside for Emma's eventual return to college to cover the costs. My insurance did not. They made this choice without telling me. Caleb worked extra shifts. Emma took on additional work. They did all of this for a man they had known for approximately 3 weeks when I arrived at their hospital on a stretcher. Preston had sat down. I did not know when it had happened. At some point during the last several minutes, the architecture of his defiance had quietly collapsed, and he had found his chair again. His face was doing nothing I could read. He was simply watching with the expression of a man who has run out of moves and knows it. Diane had not sat down. She was still standing where she had been when she dropped the microphone, and her hand was still against her mouth, and her eyes had not left Lily. "I want to be clear about something," I said, bringing my attention back to the room. "I am not telling you this to ask for sympathy. I am telling you this because you deserve to understand the full accounting of what happened 2 years ago. Not just what was taken from me, but what was given." I looked at Diane directly. 2 years ago, the people in this building chose a dog and a filing cabinet. My voice was even, conversational almost. In the same 2 years, the people standing on this stage with me tonight chose something different. I turned back to the room one more time. I am not finished, I said. There is one more introduction I need to make. And this one, I paused. This one is going to require a moment. I turned toward the left wing of the stage and held out my hand, and Emma stepped out of the dark. She walked the way she always walked, quietly, steadily, with the grounded certainty of someone who has made their peace with wherever they happen to be going. She wore a dark green dress I had not seen before. Her hair was down, which was unusual. Emma almost always wore it back, practical and efficient the way she approached most things. But in the warm chandelier light of the grand ballroom, it caught the same reddish undertone that Margaret's hair had caught in old photographs before the gray came in. I had never noticed that before. I noticed it now. She stopped beside me at the podium. 300 people looked back at her with the suspended attention of an audience that knows it is witnessing something it does not yet fully understand. This is Emma Reed, I said. 36 years old. Portland, Oregon. She makes butternut squash soup from a recipe she was never taught. She lines up objects in straight rows without thinking about it. She cried at a story about a fairground without knowing why. I paused. She is also the finest person I have met in 73 years, and I say that knowing the bar has been set very high by the man standing against that wall. Caleb, from his position at the side of the room, produced the expression of a person who was absolutely not going to cry in front of 300 strangers and was losing that particular fight. 25 years ago, I said I lost a daughter. The room shifted. Her name was Sarah. I called her Sunny. She was 5 years old, wearing a yellow dress, and I turned away for 2 minutes at a fairground on a summer afternoon in 1998. When I turned back, she was gone. My jaw tightened and released. I looked for her for 25 years. I kept her room exactly as she left it. I carried half of a silver pendant in my jacket pocket every single day because it was the last physical thing that connected me to her. I reached into my jacket and held the pendant up. The room made a sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite a murmur. Something between the two. Beside me, Emma's chin was trembling. She had her jaw set against it with everything she had. It trembled anyway. She reached into her purse and withdrew the small cloth pouch, opened it, tipped the contents into her palm. We had done this once before alone in a small furnished room in Portland with a parking lot view. But we had agreed 3 weeks ago at Carol's kitchen table that the world that had been told one story deserved to see the truth of another. Emma held her half up. I held mine. The room held everything it had. We brought them together. The click was physically nothing. 2 pieces of old silver finding each other across a broken edge. But in that ballroom, with 300 people watching, and the chandelier light falling across the joined pendant in our hands, it was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Emma broke, not quietly, not with the contained tears of someone who has measured how much they will allow themselves to feel. She broke the way a person breaks when they have carried something so long that the moment it is finally set down, the body does not know how to stand without the weight. Her shoulders shook. Her breath came in jagged, uneven waves. "Dad," she said. The word came out broken and certain at the same time, the sound of something that had been waiting a very long time to be spoken in exactly this direction. I put my arms around her and held on. From the side of the room, Caleb made a sound he would later deny. From somewhere behind me, Lily whispered, "Is Mama crying? Why is everyone crying?" A pause, then, "Oh, okay." Apparently having received a satisfactory explanation from someone nearby, Carol sat in the 3rd row with Margaret's wedding photograph in her lap, brought in her purse without telling anyone. She was not crying. Carol Whitfield did not cry in public, but her hands on the frame were not entirely steady. The room around us was not doing well. Several men in expensive suits who had arrived expecting a corporate celebration were now engaged in the private, undignified work of not weeping in public. Phones were up, but the quality of attention had shifted entirely. It was no longer documentation. It was the helpless, involuntary attention of people watching something that bypassed every defense they brought through the door. I looked at Diane. She had moved without my noticing away from where she had dropped the microphone toward the edge of the VIP table. Both hands gripped the back of a chair. She was looking at Emma with an expression I had to study carefully before I could name it. Not rage, not calculation, recognition. The unwilling recognition of a woman who had spent her entire life resenting the shadow of a sister she had never met, and was now looking at that sister for the first time. Finding that the shadow had a face. Finding that the story she had always told herself about being the one left behind was considerably more complicated than she had understood. Diane's mouth opened, closed. Her knuckles were white on the chair. She did not speak. But her face, for the first time since the night she walked out of a burning house carrying a dog, was entirely honest. Preston was not looking at any of us. He was looking at the exit. Emma straightened beside me, wiped her face with the back of her hand in the practical, unsentimental way she did most things. Squared her shoulders, looked out at the room with the red-rimmed, direct gaze of a woman who had just wept in front of 300 strangers and felt no need to apologize for it. I placed my hand over hers on the podium rail. 25 years ago, I said into the microphone, I made a mistake that cost me everything I had. 2 years ago, my daughter made a choice that cost me everything I had built. I let that land. Tonight, I would like to tell you what I intend to do about both of those things. People have asked me in the months since that evening whether I felt satisfaction standing at that podium. The honest answer is no. Not satisfaction. Something quieter, the particular stillness that comes after a very long walk when the need to keep moving finally releases and you are left standing in whatever place the walking brought you to. I looked out at the room. 2 years ago, I said, this company was called Hollis Construction and Development. 30 years in operation. Over 200 employees. More than 400 projects across Tennessee and 3 neighboring states. I let that settle over the room. It was built on the work of people who believed in what we were doing and chose to show up every day and do it well. It was not built by one person. It was not built by a name on a sign. Preston's chair scraped back. He was on his feet. I have an attorney, he said, his voice cracking at the edges the way voices do when everything behind them has collapsed. None of this has legal standing. You cannot walk into a business you abandoned and simply claim, I did not abandon it, I said quietly into the microphone. I was left in it while it was on fire. The room went so still I could hear the ventilation system above us. Preston sat down. I am not here to take anything back, I said. What I have done over the past several months is document everything, every decision made with company assets, every personnel action, every contract signed in my name while I was reported deceased. Those documents have already been submitted to the Tennessee Secretary of State's office and to the appropriate licensing boards. What happens next is not my decision. It is theirs. A low murmur moved through the crowd. Shaututu. What I am announcing tonight is what I have chosen to do with the portions of this company that remain legally within my authority as the original sole proprietor. I was never formally declared deceased by any court in this state. My family chose not to pursue legal death declaration, likely because doing so would have required probate proceedings that invited scrutiny. My attorney has confirmed that without that declaration, ownership of this company was never properly transferred. 2 years of someone else signing my name does not constitute legal transfer of title. I looked at Diane. She had stopped gripping the chair. She stood very straight, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a point above my head. The posture of a person who has decided the only way to survive the next several minutes is to be somewhere else, entirely in her mind. I turned back to the room. Caleb Reed will be appointed Director of Operations for the company's Project Management Division, effective the 1st of next month. He is qualified, honest, and he has earned it in a way that has nothing to do with whose name he was born with. I found Caleb against the wall. His jaw was tight. His eyes were steady. Emma Reed will join the advisory board in a capacity that reflects her judgment, which I can personally attest to. A sustained sound moved through the crowd. Not objection, not approval. 300 people adjusting to a new reality. Finally, I said, I am establishing a scholarship fund in the name of Lily Rose Reed. I paused. It will provide full academic scholarships for students in Tennessee who demonstrate financial need and academic promise, administered independently with Carol Whitfield as founding board member, because she is the most rigorous person I know. From the third row, Carol made a sound that was not entirely dignified and entirely her. The first use of this fund, I said, will be to cover the cost of piano lessons for one Lily Rose Reed, age 8, for as long as she wishes to play. She gave up something she loved because she thought it mattered more to help a stranger. I would like her to have it back. Lily's lower lip trembled once. Then she nodded with the composure of someone who had decided that was the appropriate response to news of this magnitude. I stepped back from the microphone. I was done. The weeks that followed had the particular quality of aftermath muted, exhausted, full of paperwork and phone calls, and the slow machinery of consequence. Diane and Preston left Nashville before the end of March. I did not see them go. Gerald told me the Commerce Street building was under licensing review and that several contracts were being investigated. What came of it was for other people to determine. It was no longer mine to carry. In early April, the sign on the building was replaced. Hollis Reed Construction and Development. Carol sent me a photograph on a Tuesday morning. I looked at it for a long time. On a Thursday evening in the middle of April, I sat on the front steps of the house on Linden Avenue, repaired, now the upper floor rebuilt over the winter, and watched the Tennessee spring move through the neighborhood. The dogwood trees were blooming white and pink with the cheerful indifference of things that keep their schedule regardless of what the people beneath them have been through. Emma sat down beside me. We did not speak for a while. Inside, Caleb was making dinner. Lily was at Margaret's upright piano in the sitting room, the one I had kept without anyone to play it for 11 years. The notes came through the open window, halting, concentrated the sound of someone learning something with full commitment. Emma leaned her head against my shoulder. She said. Not a question. Just the words set down between us in the spring evening like something she had been carrying a long time and was finally putting somewhere safe. Sonny, I said. We stayed until Caleb called us in, and the dogwoods held their bloom, and Lily played her scales from the beginning again, and the Tennessee evening came down soft over everything the way it always had. I was 73 years old. I had lost people I could not get back, and found someone I had given up finding. I had sat in a burning room and walked out of it into something I had not planned and could not have imagined. I was for the first time in a very long time exactly where I was supposed to be. People ask me sometimes what I learned from all of it. From the fire, the 2 years, the long walk back. Here is what I know. I believed for most of my life that family was something you were born into, something fixed, something that existed whether you tended it or not. I was wrong about that. Family is not a fact. It is a choice made quietly, made repeatedly, made in the small moments that nobody photographs or applauds. A man who turns left at a landing. A woman who makes soup twice until it is right. A child who breaks open a piggy bank and asks nothing in return. God has a way of returning to you what you thought was lost forever. Not always in the form you expected, not always through the door you left open. Sometimes through a stranger's house in a city you have never been to in the middle of the worst 2 years of your life. Do not do what I did. Do not wait until the house is burning to understand who is worth saving and who is worth being saved by. Look around you right now. The people who stay, they are telling you something true about who they are. Believe them. These grandpastries are the ones that remind me what endurance actually looks like. And if this revenge story moved something in you, if some part of Arthur Hollis's journey sat with you the way it has sat with me, then leave a comment below and tell me what it was. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe that stories like this one matter, subscribe so you are here for the next one. These grandpastries do not end. They just become someone else's beginning. Thank you for staying until the last word. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted with the sole purpose of sharing something meaningful. If that is not the kind of content you are looking for, that is completely understood. There are many other voices out there waiting for you. But if you are staying, we have more to tell.